Morning guys. So today I'm going to walk y'all through some maintenance on the Yamaha F250 2008 BTXR. So we're going to start by taking this foot off. Those foot, you got 3 bolts here, exact same 3 bolts on the other side, 14 millimeters. You're going to take your anode off, and under your anode you got a bolt here and you got a bolt right here. These 2 bolts, this rear bolt is longer, this forward bolt is shorter, and you got your anode and you got a hole that's going to come in from the top for your anode right there. You're going to take all them out. I think this is 12 millimeters. Let me find out what they are exactly. All right, so here they both are. As I said, the longer one is towards the prop, the shorter one goes further away from the prop, if that makes sense to y'all. But they are both 14. These are both 14 millimeters. And you have your anode. There's your anode right there, and that one is 12 millimeters. That one comes in from the top, holds your anode in from the bottom. So what I've done is I've taken the foot off already, and I've started my yearly maintenance, and just gonna work y'all through some things that I came across while working on it. Motors are different. I had to rock it and back and forth and rock it, and I finally got it off. Now that we got the foot off, I'll go and I'll look up under here. Now this right here is where your drive shaft goes up, and this groove right here to that little point, if y'all can see it, that is where a bushing goes. This bushing was tore up pretty bad, so I went ahead and replaced that bushing. And I don't know if you can see that little groove at the bottom. That's like a little keeper ring right there. Here's that keeper ring. All you gotta do is pinch it with a pair of needle nose, and you'll be able to get out of that little spot right there. My bushing inside there was in there really bad. I stuck some needle nose pliers in the bottom of that groove and reached up and grabbed it and just twisted and tore and peeled, and I finally got it out. And you're just gonna grease that dude up and put your new one back in there. It's not really that hard. Make sure you put your keeper pin back in there. All right guys, here's the bushing that goes up in there. So I got some grease on it, WR number 2 I think is what it's called, but it's for high pressure. Get that, put it in there, and it goes in pretty easy with your fingers. But I got my actual socket that I use to take the prop off, and I'm just going to tap it in the rest of the way with that. Or actually, I may even just be able to push it in. I think that's pretty good. I may give it a couple of taps right there, but I know you can't see, but I just need to make sure I got enough where I could get that ring back in there, and I think it is. So I'm just gonna give it a couple of small taps, and I'm gonna put that ring back in there, that key. And I would suggest cuffing your hands around this area or doing something, because if it comes off, it is going to go flying. So take precautions for that. Cuff your hand with a rag around that, or do something like that, and in case that thing comes popping off there and goes flying, you won't lose it. Right, key is inserted. Wasn't hard. Next, I go up my exhaust, and I actually got one of those grab 'em deals, like when you grab tools, and I put a little small flashlight and I run it all the way up as far as I can, and I look to see how bad that exhaust is, and all the way up to the top. This thing looks absolutely great. So I don't have any issues with my exhaust as of right now. This little pipe right here, that is your shifter pipe, and I'll show you what that goes to, where that connects. When you put your foot back on, this thing moves. You better make sure that thing lines up with your shifter at the bottom, and again, I'm going to show y'all where that's at, or you will not be able to go in gear. This is the gear shifter I was telling y'all about. This is what you got to line that hose up with. I was telling you, Got to get it directly over that thing, and it is a pain if you're doing it by yourself, for sure, because it just is. Just trust me. 2 people, it's a lot easier, and it's still a pain then, but you definitely got to make sure that hose lines up, because you're not going to put that foot in with the motor down. It's got to be up, and when it's leaned up, that hose wants to fall. You got to get your fingers in between there really, really carefully while you're trying to push this up into place. Doesn't give you a whole lot of room. A lot of times people's fingers get smashed. Like I said, it is a pain, but it, you know, it could be done. This right here is water, and this is where that water tube goes into, right here in this hole right here. So now that we got it off, showed y'all what's going on there, let's go look at the foot. I started this project by draining the foot oil. Foot oil screws, there's one down here and there's one up there. Now there's a screen on this that's connected by a screw. It comes from the other side to this side. It's 2 plastic pieces, and you got to remove that to get to this bottom screw. They're flat heads. You got to take the bottom one and the top one off, and it'll drain, and you get it to drain as much as you can, and usually from there you can just fill it back up. So when I drained that oil, that foot oil, I had water in my foot. Didn't know where it was coming from, so I put air to it. How I put air to it, this is the tool that I use to fill it with oil. I converted it to my bicycle pump, and once I've drained the oil, I put this inside there, make sure that was on there, make sure this is on there, make sure it's tightened up really good, and I just gave it 1 pump. I just started coming down. You know, you don't want to go too hard. You can actually blow a good seal. Don't ever pump it and pump it hard. Go kind of slow with it. The places this thing can leak, it can leak from this one, which this is where you're going to have it in there at. It can leak from down here. It can leak from this shifter gear right here, the one that I was telling y'all about, that's neutral, forward and reverse. And this is your prop shaft. I'm sorry, this is your drive shaft. And underneath all this right here, this is your water pump and impeller stuff. There's more oil seals underneath here too, and it can leak from there. So you would have to take all this off to be able to inspect if air is coming out from there. So I've already changed this out. But when I pumped it with air, I had soapy water on here, I had soapy water on there, and I had soapy water in here, and this is what was sitting in there. This is the bearing housing that I pulled, and these are the oil seals that hold the foot oil in from here, and this is where it was leaking from. Is these oil seals right here. My soapy water was bubbling around that, so that's why I pulled this. And now I got to replace these seals. Let's show you how I actually pulled this. All right, this little water pipe, before you pull that out on this particular motor, you have to pull this water pipe out, because if you don't, that water pipe it sits. And it sits inside here. When it's sitting down in there, this end of the tube sits down in there. So if you don't pull this out, you're gonna bend it. So, and this sits down here. All right, you can get that gasket out the way, and you got to pull that out of there before you actually pull that. All right, I made my own tool for pulling this. This dude sat in there like this. These 2 bolts, this bolt and this bolt, are last. It sits in there like this. All right, you have a plate that sits on top of this. All right, there's that plate, it sits on top of that like that. All right, and you got to take these 2 bolts off also, and I think they're 10 millimeter, either 10 or 12. So when that sits in there, you see that top, see how it fits in there like that. So that's going to be in there. You're going to take them 2 bolts off, pull it off. This is still sitting in there. that bolt and that bolt off, and then you got to pull it. Now you can buy a puller. Before you buy a puller, you want to make sure you measure this and you get the right depth that you need. I personally made my own puller. This is the puller I made. Basically a piece of 1/4 inch flat bar, 1/2 inch bolt. These are the bolts that you would stick down in cement, a couple of nuts, and what you do is you put it on here, and when you gotta finagle these two ends and get them inside here, and the biggest key is to make sure when you twist, you want to make sure these things, your hooks, are going towards the inside of this whole bearing carrier. All right, right now the one on the left side is facing wrong. When it comes out, it would be scratching against the inside of the motor. See how it sits? You don't want it like that. This is how you want it. You want that one like that, you want that one like that. So when you go to tighten on these bolts, they turn to the right, and they keep up against the bearing carrier itself and not to the outside. So I get them on there, I get it right, and that flat bar rests up on that prop shaft, and you just start tightening down on it, each side, a little bit on each side, and you know, if it's not too corroded, it'll come out. And that's how I pulled it out. And this is where we are right now. All right, so you pull this bearing carrier out, and here's the new seals I got to replace right here. And they make a tool you can pull these out with, but you can just use a flathead screwdriver also. What you don't want to do is scratch the inside of this wall. You don't want to do that at all. And I'll tell you another thing. Some people will tell you that you can drill screws into these seals right here like this. Drill screws, put one on one side, one directly across from the other. Put a pair of vice grips on them and pull them out. Now this is while it's on the prop shaft is what I'm talking about. If you're just pulling these seals. The reason why I don't do that, if you go over here and for some reason you accidentally scratch this prop shaft right here, it's going to ruin your new seals when you put them back on. And that's going to eat your new seals, and they're not going to last as long as they should. So, and another thing is, these seals both go in there the same way. There's not one way and one the other. They both go in there the same way. So we're going to get these seals pulled. We're going to put the new ones in there. All right, so I got my flathead screwdriver, and I found where one seal sat right on top of the other. I gave it a good tug, and there's that one. So you can see how it sits in there. You got the open groove of the seals facing towards the prop, if you will. You're going to want to hold this thing as good as you can with something. If you got a vise, use that. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and tell you that they come out easy, but I can't pull it with holding the camera. I just wanted to show you how I did it. So I'm going to have to set the camera down and get it worked out just a little bit, but this is what I'm doing. I'm holding it in my knees and I'm working it out of there. All right, we got it pulled out of there. Got both of them pulled out. I'm going to clean this thing up all inside there as good as I can. It doesn't look like it's bad at all, but I am just going to give it a quick little clean. And then before you put your new seals in there, put you some fresh water resistant grease on it and help them seals go in there easier. And actually, while you got it, look in there and make sure there's some needle bearings sitting right there. Make sure them aren't bad, and if they are, that's a whole nother process. I'm not going to get into that. That does take a little bit more tools. This is the way it goes. You got the open side like that, and you got the flat side like that, is the best I can describe it. And the flat goes in first. All right, that's how they were in there. So I got my little driver right here. I don't know what size that is, guys. I apologize. This is for popping bearings and putting bearings in, but also seals. So I got that on there, and I'm gonna do my best to film it. Just give it some taps till it seats at the bottom. But you definitely want something like this. If you don't have this tool, find a socket that'll fit perfect around the very edges, because you want to get it down there even. You don't want to be in there cockeyed, and you don't want to slam it down in there. All right, I know that was shaky because it was on my knee, but so we got that dude in there, it's seated, and we just put the second one on there. I think it's useless to show y'all the second one. I'm just gonna grease it up, put it on there, same as that one, and drive it down till it's seated, and that'll be the seals. All right, so we got it driven down in there. There she is. Next is O-rings. These has two O-rings, one at the front, one at the back, right here and right here. If you go through all the work of pulling this out, you need to replace these. These are non-reusable, is what they say. So you're gonna want to pull them out. I just got like a little hook right here. There's nothing to them. And there's liable to be, when you pull it, I've already cleaned this thing up really good. There's liable to be a lot of crusty all around. So again, I've cleaned it up pretty good. I'm gonna pull them off. Here's my two new ones, and we're gonna put them back on there. All right, got them on there, and this one calls for corrosion resistant grease, which the grease that I have is, it's water resistant and corrosion resistant. So I just use the same. When I put them on there, I put this one on first, and you want to come and put them on from this side. For me, I put this one on first, and I come and I put the second one on. I don't come from this way because I feel like it stretches that O-ring out too much, and I want the least stretch that I can put on these things. This bad boy is all done, and this is one of the main things you look for. Make sure you got good free spin right here. So this is sitting inside a bearing down in there, and if this thing doesn't spin like that, you got bearing problems. It has a whole nother deal right there. You got to have special tools to pop this off of here. You're not just gonna pull that out. That is in there really, really tight. Not gonna get into that. I'm just letting you know that if this thing ain't spinning like this, you got issues. So I'm good. I've done everything I need to do with this particular piece. I'm gonna slide this dude in there and show y'all another way to keep you orientated. I was telling you about this pipe. So that's where the pipe goes. So this tells you, you know that it has to go in there this way, right? So just another way to keep you there. So these bolts that come out of here, there's two long ones and there's two short ones. The two long ones are the first ones that actually, well, I say first, I don't know how you want to say it. The two long ones is what holds this to this. The two short ones is what holds this to this. All right, so the two long ones, clean them off good as you can, and these things take red Loctite. Put you some red Loctite on there, tighten them down, and they're 22 foot-pounds. All right, 10 millimeter. The longer one is 10 millimeter. Shorter ones is 12 millimeter. The shorter ones does not have a foot-pound specified, but you use white thread lock on these. Before you put your bearing housing back in, make sure you take one of these two bolts out of there, screws, whatever you want to call them. It doesn't matter which one. What it's going to do is relieve the air pressure as you're forcing that thing in, because you could take the risk of blowing a seal right off the bat if you don't. So take one of them out before you put that bearing housing in. Let's get it on there. When you put this thing on there, be really, really careful. Don't just slam it on there, because you do not want to damage your new seals. Get it on there nice and smooth and easy. Now when this comes down in there, it's going to sit about flush with this outer rim right here. All right, so I took my tool that I used to drive the seals with, and I took the end off of it, and I just put it right here where the bolts go. 1, 2, 3, 4 small taps. 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 Back and forth till I got it sunk down in there a little bit. You get it sunk down in there. Put your screws in it. You can put your bolts in it, and the bolts will do the rest for you. But just want to get it sunk below this flush line a little bit, just so your screws can grab, or your bolts rather. So there we go. All right, guys. So again, get that down just enough for them bolts to grab, and then gonna work them back and forth. Turn this one a few, turn this one a few, and it'll go, you know, as even as you possibly can. It'll start driving down, and then you'll feel them bottom out. You'll feel it where it bottoms out. Where it bottoms out, that's where you want to stop. Put your torque wrench on it, 22 foot-pounds. Put this one on, them are on there. Put your white thread lock on them, and again, these have no specified torque amount, so just gonna get them on there and get them snug. All right, guys, got it all back on there, and like I said, this is all yearly maintenance for me. This whole deal wasn't just to replace this. I've done yearly maintenance, so I'm greasing all the things I need to grease and all that. So there's a grease port right there, water resistant grease. I'm gonna pop some of that in there. I'm gonna give it a squirt, turn this prop shaft, give it a squirt, turn this prop shaft, and then we're gonna put the prop and all back on there. All right, so here's my prop, putting it back on there. Now my prop is not an actual Yamaha prop. It is the setup where, I'm gonna be 100% honest with you, I don't know the name of the system, but it's the system that you pull this whole thing out the hub right here. You can pop that out from the other direction, and it's got the little rubber rods in there, and this whole system is to help prevent you for, if you ever spin a hub, you're not actually losing your prop. All you're losing is the little rubber pieces inside there, and you can just replace the little rubber pieces. So that's what I have on here. So it is not a original Yamaha, so if you have original Yamaha deal, it's going to be different. But mine, this goes on there first. That big beveled end goes down in that boy like that, and the prop itself sits on top of that. Of course, I got it up against the shed, so I can't show you that. And I got this goes on top of the prop. This goes on top of that piece that sits down in there, and then the nut goes on top of that. So we'll get all that on there. I didn't show you, but I put some grease on the inside of those splines in there on here. So I put some corrosion resistant grease on there, corrosion water resistant grease. Lined everything up like I told you. Got that on there. And your prop nut, remember your prop nut never has to be super tight. Get it down there hand tight. All right, and you're gonna put a lock. You're gonna have to put a piece of wood or something in between here. I hadn't done that yet, but you want to get it hand tight, and then just give it a couple little turns. Make sure you got you're lined up to put your cotter pin in. All right, we got that back in there, and I told y'all about this thing going back in there. Now you see the top of that. That's where this water pipe goes into the top of that. Put you a little bit of corrosion water resistant grease on the tip of that. Slide it in there, and put your gasket that right there that goes on top of it. Put it right on top of it. Now there's a little metal piece that when you take that gasket off, it may come off with it, but it does separate. It just comes right out, and you can put it right back in, and you put that gasket around there. You can replace this thing if you want. I don't know what part number it is, but you can look it up. It ain't very expensive. If it's dry rotted really bad, definitely replace it. All right, guys, so something hit me and I had an idea. But anyways, that tube right there, like I said, when this motor is leaned up, it's gonna fall this way. So what I have done while the motor was leaning up is the only way you're gonna be able to put this foot on. So I leaned that motor up, I pushed it up, and I put me 2 bolts in. One here and one directly on the other side from here, just enough to hold this foot on. All right, put the motor down. While the motor is down, I put the front of my boat as far down as it could go, and I got a jack underneath it. and then I took the bolts out and I lowered it. So now my motor is not tilted and this thing's not falling. It's not going like this or any other way. So I'm going to jack it up very slowly and it should fall right through there. So this idea just hit me. I don't know why I haven't done it before. I've been changing this thing for years, but yeah, that is how we're going to do it. And there it is, guys. Took me like 3 seconds to get that dude lined up. Trying to get to where y'all can see it. Hopefully y'all can see it. It wasn't quite over it, but I could just get my finger in there and push that thing over just enough. And I gave it just a tiny more bump up, slid right on. Way easier than I've done it years previous. So yeah, I will be doing it like this from now on. So we'll jack this thing the rest of the way up, and we're gonna get these bolts in them. I'm gonna tell y'all the specs on them to torque them down, and also put some thread lock on them, some white thread lock that I have. I'm gonna put that on them too. All right, we got all, like I said, we got all the bolts in. And don't forget these two under here. That one and that one. Remember, the longer one is towards the prop, the shorter one is towards the front. They are also 34 foot-pounds. And now you're gonna put your anode on. Your anode, see that little bitty hole right there? That faces forward. This other bolt is 12 millimeter. Put it in there and it's 31 foot-pounds. I'm gonna get it in there and be done. So now we're just down to filling this thing back up with oil. I think it takes right at 1 quart. It's like 0.98 something. So 1 quart get you through. You definitely got to put new seals every time you take these bolts, screws loose. You got to replace them washers, put a little oil on them. I got my other one right there. Fill it from the bottom, and when it starts coming out the top, you put this one on, and you're gonna take this one off and put this one on as fast as you can. So just gonna pump it on in there. There it goes. See it bubbling? It took just a little bit over 1 quart, but you want to give it a pump till it kind of stops bubbling. There we go, steady stream. Get that on there, tighten her up, put the bottom one on, we done.